Welcome to the Exploring Unschooling podcast. I'm Pam Laricchia, longtime unschooling mom and author. Join me and my wonderful guests for interviews, information, and inspiration about unschooling and living joyfully with your family. You can find the episode show notes, your free introductory ebook, What is Unschooling, and lots more information at livingjoyfully.ca. And here's the show. Hello, everyone. I'm Pam Laricchia, and this is episode number 59 of the podcast. It's the 10th of February, 2017, as I record this intro. And I'm recording this intro early because this episode goes out while I'm at the Unschoolers Platform Conference in Illinois. So, in this episode, I chat with my husband, Rocco. He and I have talked about him being on the podcast here and there over the last few months. But this week, I actually came up with some questions and we sat down to talk just to see how it went. It's how we approach choices in our lives, and as you'll hear in the interview, how we approached unschooling. We figure we'd try things out and see how they go. If he wasn't comfortable in the end, there was no obligation for us to share the episode. But here we are. As we sat down to get started, he mentioned that it was weird to be talking about our lives in this meta way, that we're usually just living them. And I thought that was such a great observation. We've always been living our lives as a family of 5. It's only been me who was interested in looking at unschooling from this bigger analytical perspective. That's something I've loved to do since I was a kid. I'm definitely a systems-oriented thinker. Or as Myers-Briggs would say, as an INTJ, I like to develop long-range explanatory perspectives. It's just how I'm wired. And I don't really have a personal update since I just recorded last week's intro yesterday. But next week, I'll definitely tell you all about the conference. And a big thank you to everyone supporting the show on Patreon. I deeply appreciate your support. I love that you're helping me share unschooling information with anyone who's curious to learn more and explore ways to live this wonderful lifestyle with their family. If you'd like to support the show, even for as little as $1 a month, check out the Exploring Unschooling page at patreon.com. That's patreon.com/exploring unschooling. So for this episode, I went looking for a quote around paradigm shifts and came across this one from Deepak Chopra. The symbolic language of the crucifixion is the death of the old paradigm. Resurrection is a leap into a whole new way of thinking. It resonated with the reading I've done around Joseph Campbell's work on the hero's journey and with my own unschooling journey. Moving to unschooling was definitely a shift to a whole new way of thinking. Once I started down this path, I found myself questioning so many ideas around parenting, childhood, and learning that I had assumed were truths, but had actually not really thought through before. And now everything was up for grabs. One of the additional challenges with the journey to unschooling is that oftentimes there is one parent who is spearheading this journey for the family. So what about the other parent? That was our situation. So before we get into the interview, I thought I'd share a blog post that I wrote almost 4 years ago now, talking about ways to support our spouses or partners or significant others as they too learn about unschooling. And the post was called Learning is Learning No Matter Your Age, or helping the reluctant spouse/partner/other significant adult in your child's life learn about unschooling. It's pretty typical that one parent takes on the bulk of responsibility for the minutiae of day-to-day parenting. Maybe one parent is working out of the home and one parent is unschooling with the children, though there are lots of different takes on that theme. Maybe both are working outside the home and they alternate hours. Maybe the parent earning the bulk of the income works from home. Maybe it's a single parent working from home or using some child care, like last week when we spoke with Melissa. Or maybe there's an ex in the mix as well. Regardless of the circumstances, it's understandable that it's the parent who dives in and learns about homeschooling and unschooling that becomes more and more interested in moving the family in that direction. Often the spouse or partner agrees to try it out for a while, not understanding it very deeply, but trusting the more informed parent. Yet, if one parent has taken the bulk of responsibility for learning about and implementing unschooling in the family, chances are the other parent will eventually start to wonder what's going on. Maybe parenting philosophies seem to be changing and they puzzle over how they fit in. Maybe they start to worry about their children's learning. And that's not surprising. They can't find the school-type learning they are likely looking for anywhere. On the other hand, it's probably an exciting time for the unschooling-focused parent. You're understanding unschooling more and more deeply, and you can see the positive effects this lifestyle is having on your children and yourself. Maybe you're also feeling a bit frustrated that your spouse/partner isn't seeing it too. Try to breathe through and release that. Be mindful not to fall into the role of teacher, doling out a reading list to be completed, the test being life under your watchful eyes. It won't help them learn any faster and will probably cause lots of frustration in the relationship. Keep putting yourself back in the mindset that you're not trying to convince them, you're trying to help them learn. With unschooling, when we look at learning, the focus is on the learner, not on the teacher. It's not about you, it's about them. Look at things through their eyes. Understand where they're coming from. They care about their children. They want what's best for them. Meet them where they are. What are they curious about right now? How can you support their learning about unschooling? Well, how do they learn best? Unschooling is based on universal and lifelong learning principles, meaning there aren't separate ways for kids and adults to learn. You've discovered your kids have their preferred ways of learning things. Adults do too. So don't be tempted to overwhelm your spouse or partner with information in the way that you like to learn. Share the information you think they would find helpful in the format and amount that best supports their learning style. If they are keen readers and want to dive into the details, feel free to share the websites and forums and email lists and books that you've been devouring for months. Maybe they'll read, ask questions, and great conversations will ensue. But if they aren't interested in learning that way, remember that's not a slight against you any more than it is when your kids don't take you up on an offer. You're learning more about how your spouse likes to learn. And it's to your advantage as the primary unschooling parent to help your spouse or partner understand what you're up to. So devote some of your time and energy to making that learning as easy as possible for them. As you know, there are lots of ways to learn things. And when does learning typically happen best? When it makes a connection with some knowledge or question they already have, or when they're particularly curious about something. So notice when a piece of information about unschooling might make a connection for them. Is there a particular issue or question your spouse or partner has right now? Let's pick a topic, say video games, and brainstorm some ways you can share information over the next while to help them discover all the learning that your child's doing while playing. Share information that directly connects to the question. Sometimes sharing information online by email or Facebook message is less emotionally charged than face-to-face discussions. You could forward an unschooling-related discussion email or a forum post or a link to a web page or article, maybe with a short preface from you about how it relates to your current discussions. Like, we were chatting about video games and learning the other night, and I came across this information you might find interesting. Not a long, drawn-out treatise citing a dozen sources. You're not trying to overwhelm them. You're trying to help them learn. So share in digestible bites. Point out related moments in your lives as they happen. Hey, look, Todd is reading through the game guide, figuring out how to do the puzzle he's stuck on. Maybe they don't notice those moments on their own, caught up in their own things. Invite your spouse or partner to get directly involved. Todd and I are trying to figure out this puzzle he's stuck on. Can you help us? Hands-on observations can be really helpful in seeing the learning that is happening. Even better, ask him to play. Often parents don't realize how much quick thinking and analysis is going on during gameplay until they try it themselves and all of a sudden have to manage their health level, their map, and their weapons while quickly contemplating the most effective moves to make. Is there a book on the topic you think they'd find particularly helpful? If they don't like to read, what about an audiobook? More books have audio editions, and they might be a great fit with driving to work or while doing work around the house. And now, 4 years later, maybe this podcast and other podcasts about unschooling. If there's not a particular issue, you might want to generally help them feel involved and engaged in everyone's day-to-day lives. You could snap and send a few pictures during the day, letting them see what you're up to and including a brief description. Or you could put that information on a blog, even making it invite only so you share what the kids are up to only with close family. If you think they'd benefit from seeing other unschooling families in action, maybe find an unschooling gathering or conference through an online group with whom you feel a connection. If you have a local group, maybe set up a weekend park day so that more spouses or partners are able to attend. The key is to share your lives with them so they feel connected, so they can see firsthand that their children aren't being neglected, but are living and learning and growing and thriving. Don't expect it to happen overnight. Remember, they likely have less time each day to devote to learning about unschooling, but they are still fully devoted to raising their children. And remember to support all their learning, certainly about unschooling, but also about anything else they're interested in. If they have a hobby, happily support that just as you would your children's interests. Listen to them share their joy. Share with them related things you think they might find interesting. An article online, a magazine you found at the store, a documentary you found on Netflix. Not only are those nice and loving things to do, they are also real examples of unschooling learning in action. Show them how unschooling works. Don't just tell them, because learning is learning no matter your age. And now, on to the interview with Rocco. Hi everyone, I'm Pam Laricchia from livingjoyfully.ca, and today I'm here with my husband Rocco. Hi honey.
Hello.
It's very cool and weird to have you on the show. We began unschooling back in 2002, and our 3 kids are now all young adults, and I thought it would be very interesting to share your perspective on our experience. So let's take a moment to go back to the beginning. When I first discovered homeschooling was legal, it was a thing, and pretty soon after, we figured we'd try it out and see how it went. I remember that it was March break, and I went around and told each of the kids that apparently they didn't have to go to school, and would they like to stay home instead, to which they all said yes very loudly.
And with big smiles on their face.
Big smiles on their face. I remember feeling both scared because this was so different than anything I had ever thought I'd do, and excited because it seemed like an amazing answer to our challenges with the schools. So, do you remember how you felt at that time?
Yes. I was a little nervous, but excited. You had done so much research that I had 101 questions, and you were able to put me at ease very, very easily. I guess the thing that really stood out for me is that you said we would try it out. It wasn't cast in stone. And that was really the key for me to accept unschooling as a lifestyle.
Yeah, that's something we do, right? Whenever there's some big change, we kind of like, well, let's take the next step and see what it's like. And then we'll decide on what the next step is. So it's not an all or nothing thing at the beginning.
Yeah. I was pretty comfortable, to be honest with you. You know, my initial reaction and my first concern was, holy cow, how are we going to manage on one income?
Yeah.
Right? You knew that was coming, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, we had discussed that. We had looked at everything. You know, at the time, you know, with 3 kids, we had daycare and
private school. We had done so much for our kids, everything that we could possibly do, and it wasn't cheap.
So as it worked out, I think we did all the math, and there was literally no change. One of our incomes was going directly into paying for either education or daycare,
living expenses,
of course. But it wasn't a deal breaker, let's say, right? As a matter of fact, it was, nothing. And as it turned out, our lifestyle did not change at all. Financially, it didn't make a difference. It was a wash. So that was a big concern, I guess, to start with. And because the math worked out, we were able to move forward.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. The math worked out very well for you and for me, because I was the one dealing with the schools and doing all that side. So both those concerns worked out really well for me, because I'm a numbers person too. I'm an engineer. I needed to see those, but we had our spreadsheet, like we have spreadsheets for most things.
Yeah.
And that worked out well. Now, so we'll move forward a little bit.
Okay.
I stayed home with the kids, and you would go to work every day. And especially since you were so often meeting with customers, with new people, with technical consulting, all that kind of stuff, I bet, and I know, that you were regularly asked the typical social questions like, nice to meet you, Rocco. You have kids. What grade are they in? And I was wondering how you would answer that question, how you would feel in those moments.
It was actually easier than you think.
Oh, good.
Right? People would say, hey, you got kids. What grade are they in? And my standard response was, well, my kids are homeschooled and they're so-and-so old. This is their age. I never really got into what grade they were in because, quite frankly, I had no idea what grade they would have been in. So,
I know I had to do the math. Whenever anybody asked me, I'd have to try and, how old were they when they left? They were in this grade.
Yeah, I totally avoided that part. I just went, this is how old they are. Yeah. And then they would ask the next thing. Of course, the next question is, well, how do they socialize? Right? Well, I would ask them, I said, where'd you meet your best friend? Oh, I'm on my hockey team. Well, that's not school, is it? Right? So I guess there's other places to meet friends and socialize, right? Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts and ballet lessons and all different sorts of activities which the kids did participate in. So socializing question came up, and that wasn't a problem. Then the next question, of course, is, well, how do they go to university or college, right? And that was another easy one. I said, well, you do know that a lot of schools, universities, and colleges have a special category for homeschooled kids, right? And that was always a little eye-opener for them. Really? I said, yeah, it's just like when, you're an adult and you want to go back to school, college or school, right? They say, okay, you're an adult, and they give you personal interviews, and they kind of watch where you're coming from. And, worst comes to worst, they'd have to go and do some standardized test to get accepted, right? And big deal. That's easily overcome just by a little bit of studying. Yeah,
exactly. Whatever, depending on what they're interested in, if they wanted to go, depending on the course, because sometimes if it was something artistic, it might be portfolios or whatever. There's always a way to figure it out. And even if it is go doing a few online courses to get a particular grade or certificate or, standardized test, whatever, you meet it when you have an interest in it.
That's right.
Exactly.
The whole unschooling thing was, I guess I always looked at it as maybe as a temporary thing, because if it didn't work out, they can just go back to school. Well, what's the worst that can happen?
They can't be refused.
Exactly. It's not like the schools gave you an ultimatum and said, hey, if you take your kids out, you can never come back, right?
Yeah, exactly. Okay, what was the next question I had here? So not only were you surrounded by conventional parenting and education conversations daily at work, you also weren't at home most days to see the kids learning in action, which is really that first year or so how I learned so much about how learning works and built my trust in unschooling for them. it's so hard when you have both those pieces. You know, you have the conventional ideas on the outside and you don't have a lot of personal experience about how it's going on the inside. And I know there were times over the years where you were feeling less sure about unschooling. So I was hoping you could talk a little bit about what helped you move through those times.
Well, okay. So, yes, I missed a lot of time during the day, but I quickly understood that unschooling was a 24-hour thing. It wasn't just during school hours. So it's not like I missed everything. I just missed maybe some of the prime time. But then again, you would give me a recap of what you did during the day. And all right, I missed out on going to the science center, the libraries, the parks, and the museums. But we would do those again on weekends anyway. It's not like not like you only went during school hours, right? We would go on those places during our vacations too. So you still saw it in action. I still saw it in action, right? I still saw it in action, and it wasn't something that I missed. I don't feel like I missed out on something. Mm-hmm. Hey, I may have missed out on many hours of prime bonding time, but it wasn't everything.
Oh yeah, no, you still feel like because also so many times, especially as the kids get a bit older, evening becomes prime time for them doing their things, right? Yeah. So you always saw, as long as they weren't sleeping, they were unschooling, right?
Well, yeah, that's true. Actually, yeah, as the kids got older, I did see all of it. I did see everything that was going on. I didn't miss much because they were sleeping.
and you started working from home for a while there too. So, that helped too, because then your hours were a little less 9 to 5-y, right?
That's right. Yes.
Okay, next question. What were a couple of things that you enjoyed most about our unschooling lifestyle?
One word: freedom.
Freedom, yes.
The freedom of not having to get up early, wake the kids up in the morning while they're dead asleep, and the hassle of getting them dressed while they didn't want to, and force feeding them to have breakfast before going to school, and then of course getting them to school and picking them up. And I did not miss that, and I don't think you did either.
I did not.
Right? The other thing that really I always see as a major benefit was our vacations.
Yeah,
because we always took we still do. We take our vacations in off-peak times so that there's no crowds, right? How many times have we gone to Disney World and gotten to go on rides and see our attractions with very minimal waiting? Every time we look at these signs, I remember sitting up one of these signs, and if you're this far back, they have a sign that says you are 2 hours from reaching your attraction. And meanwhile, we're zipping through there in 5-10 minutes. And we got to see more of the park. We get to see more of the attractions. We got to do a heck of a lot more. We got to go to the beach during lower season, so there was never huge crowds, and you didn't have to worry about the kids getting lost in a crowd. So vacations were definitely a highlight, actually.
Yeah, I think one of the important things is that because our kids didn't really like crowds, right? So if we were going at a high time, a busier time, it would have been, not only would we have had to wait so much more, but it would have been a more stressful experience for everybody. That's right. Because it would not be comfortable for any of us.
None of us like crowds.
None of us like crowds. Very, very true. Okay, next question. What was one of the most challenging aspects of moving to unschooling for you?
Oh, the hardest part was definitely trying to deal with my family.
Yeah.
Right. My family are traditional immigrants that came on the boat, a long time ago. And, my parents, I think if they were lucky, they had a grade 2 or 3 education. And, they thought school was like the, next best thing since sliced bread. And when they came to this country, they thought that was the way to go. And, they put all of their kids through school and college and university. the irony is that my parents were basically unschooled. Fortunately, my sister's a career school teacher, elementary school teacher, and she was very supportive of us, right? So she knew about homeschooling, and I think she embraced the unschooling aspect of it, and she was really the one that would kind of calm my parents down and explain to them the benefits of our choices and how it's not the worst thing in the world and how there's still many options and doors that can be open for us.
And you know what? I remember something that she said, even back when the kids were still in school, that had helped me feel more comfortable with unschooling as a choice, because you know, when I would talk to her about some of the challenges in school and stuff, but you know how the kids were thriving at home and everything, and she talked about, because as being a teacher, she said our kids' experience was so much bigger because as a family outside of school, we did all sorts of things with them. So even when they were in school, we had like little mini vacations where we would go. We still, you know, we didn't just start going to the science center and the museum when they left school. We just went more often, right?
That's right. That's right.
So even when the kids were in school, she was saying, you know, your kids have so much more experience than most of the kids that she sees in school. So that, you know, made me think that, oh, you know, it's the family environment is a really big deal. And so understanding that we were already providing that kind of support for them helped me realize that, you know, when we took them out of school, we could just continue to doing that. So yeah, that reminded me when you mentioned her.
Yeah.
That's cool.
But yeah, I remember my mother told me several times she thought I was doing the wrong thing. And that's tough.
Hard. Yeah.
That's tough. Right. But I could see from the joy in my kids' faces that we were doing the right thing. And I didn't see any reason for change, no matter how much she protested.
It's hard, though. You just kind of have to accept them where they are, right? Because you can't convince them. You can't try to. You can answer questions and try to help them understand what you're doing, but you can't just make them change their mind.
That's right.
It's something you just you live with, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, last question. Looking back now that our kids are young adults, what do you appreciate most about unschooling?
Well, that's actually a tough question. I didn't really know how to answer that, but in a word, I think flexibility. Yeah. Flexibility is really what I appreciate the most from unschooling. There's, nothing is set in stone. We're able to turn on a dime if we need to. Always had plenty of options.
That ability for us to, like you were saying, like turn on a dime, change directions, that was so helpful with unschooling, because as our children's interests and things changed and morphed, it really helped to be able to keep that open mind, didn't it? Instead of thinking that, oh, they with Lissy, she likes photography, so she's got to be a photographer. Because, whenever we would tell somebody that's, even when she was 14 years old, and we'd say she's really into photography, oh, she's going to be a photographer, right?
Yeah.
It was always just an assumption. And we would just say, well, maybe, but it's not always fixed. It's never fixed. Even she doesn't know that that's where she'll stay. Same with all our kids. It's that ability to understand that the moment that you're in is so important. It's everything. And that it's okay that if the next step that you see is like a 90-degree turn.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm just a proud papa, but I think my kids are awesome.
Yeah, I think so too.
All of them. They each have their own character. They've developed to be wonderful young adults, considerate, generous. everything you would want in a young adult, right? And, I think they don't have the baggage that I think some kids that went to school, they don't suffer from the same, I'm going to say, trauma, right? Because a lot of kids in school suffer from anxiety.
There's so much judgment in that.
Absolutely.
That you have to, if you don't do well, you're That's a failure. Right?
The problem was, and I think we discussed many times, was expectation.
Yes,
right?
Expectations.
We never really put a lot of expectations on our kids, because expectations is really one of the things that stifle people.
Yeah.
If you're expected to do something, and I've gone through this, I'm sure you have too, that if you're expected to do something and you don't really want to do that, you force yourself to do it, and you suffer through it.
Mm-hmm.
I really believe that.
Yeah, no, that's true. And one thing that, when you're having a new kind of a new conversation with someone, when you talk about how I don't have expectations, they think, oh, well, they really believe that a human being without expectations will do nothing. It's like, well, if you don't expect me to do this, I'm just going to sit on my butt and do nothing. It's such a different life, isn't it? When you're able to live without those expectations and start choosing what you do. It's
the difference between expectation and goals.
Yeah,
you can have goals, but not the expectations.
Yeah. And it's amazing. It's amazing the goals that, our kids, unschooling kids, I know that people will set for themselves when they're free of other people's expectations on top of them, right? The weight of somebody else's expectations of what you do is so huge and debilitating, I think, right? It just gets in the way of us making our choices, because then we're always second guessing ourselves too. Because people, you want to make your best choice, the one that works best for you. So you take in all the information and try to figure out a good path forward. So you don't need somebody else's expectations on top of that. That's just extraneous, because you're already considering all your own constraints and, strengths and weaknesses and challenges and all those kinds of things. Those just go into thinking about it. And that's something that unschooling kids have years and years of experience doing, right? Because that's what they do when they're growing up. Instead of just doing what they're told, they're figuring out what works for them, and they're figuring out just how they tick enough so they understand themselves, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's what's been cool.
Right.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I do want to say to everyone too, a very big thank you for all your help in producing the podcast. If you guys don't know, he does all the sound editing and the production stuff. Without him, this podcast would be a whole lot harder for me to put together. And we work with our strengths and help each other out whenever we can. That's kind of how we do things, right?
I look forward to the weekly podcast. It's always fun. I enjoy it.
Yeah, so thank you very much. And it feels weird to wish you a good day because you're sitting right here beside me. But I do hope that you're having a great day. And even better now that this podcast recording's over.
Yay!
Thank you so much, hon.
You're welcome.
Thanks for listening. I hope you found it helpful. You might also like the backlist episodes at livingjoyfully.ca/podcast. While you're there, be sure to check out the second book in my Living Joyfully with Unschooling series, Free to Live, Create a Thriving Unschooling Home. In it, I dive into the 4 characteristics that I found helped unschooling flourish in our home: curiosity, patience, strong relationships, and trust. One reviewer wrote, "Really enjoyed this short and sweet book. It has marvelous one-liners, and though I'm not an underliner, I found myself underlining on every page." Another said, "I believe it would benefit any homeschooler or parent to read this book, as it re-emphasizes the importance of the relationship between a parent and a child in the learning process. I plan to reread this book. It is rich and full of gems. Give yourself some time to absorb it before rushing into unschooling." Until next time, have fun living and learning with your family.